Hey, what is up everyone? Welcome back to another video. In this video, we're gonna do some more Pone Labs. And hey, if you've never heard of Pone Labs, you need to check it out. Pone Labs is hands down the best platform for learning hands-on cloud security. They have labs that cover AWS, Azure, and GCP. And the cool thing about these labs is you can approach many of them from a CTF approach where you just kind of stumble your way through it, or a guided approach. But even for the CTF labs, they have a full written detailed walkthrough to guide you through it. And I have a lot of videos covering many of these labs. If you want to check out Pone Labs, go to ponelabs.io. You can set up a free account, and even without paying any money, you get full access to 30 different labs from the different cloud providers that give you a taste of the platform. And hey, if you sign up for premium access, it is around only $200 for the entire year. Gives you access to all the premium labs, gives you access to the new Thunderdome network, which by the time you're watching this video on YouTube, that network will be out. For those of you watching on stream, the Thunderdome network comes out in just a few days, which is a red team cloud network that requires pwning AWS, GCP, and Azure, a few different flags, I think 9 different flags in a realistic corporate environment. So super excited about that. I have early access to it, so I can tell you from experience, it is incredible. But in this video, we're going to switch it up and do some blue teaming. I've showcased a lot of red teaming on my channel, red teaming in the cloud, and red teaming pen testing is awesome, but we also have to help people to know how to defend against these attacks. So in this video, we're going to talk about how to prevent breaches with AWS IAM Access Analyzer. Now, if you're totally new to the cloud, hang around. You're not going to be overwhelmed. I'm going to slow down. We're going to take it slow. I'll take questions from those of you watching live to help understand what is going on. But many of the videos that you've seen me do where we are compromising users in AWS or S3 buckets, which are kind of like storage out in the cloud of AWS, all of this could be prevented if an organization properly implements AWS IAM Access Analyzer. So this is an incredibly powerful blue team tool in the AWS toolbox. So we are going to learn all about it in this lab. We begin with an access key and a secret access key. Now, for those of you who might be new to AWS, this is already a little bit confusing, but an access key ID is sort of like a username, and a secret access key is sort of like a password. So I'll show you how to authenticate and everything with that, but let's first set up our notes. So we have our scenario here. It's our first day as a blue team consultant for our client, huge logistics, and we have set up several AWS native services to supplement our existing security suite. Our goal is to set up IAM Access Analyzer, identify what issues might be present, and work to remediate them. So let's go ahead and grab that just for our notes. I'm going to pull our notes out to a separate tab, and we will do H1 scenario, and we'll just copy the information in there. And whoops, we'll jump back. If I can get back to Pone Labs. We have our lab prerequisites, basic AWS knowledge. But hey, if you're watching this video, like I said, I will guide you through and do my best to explain it, and foundational security knowledge. So our learning outcomes, here's what we want to learn. We're going to set up AWS IAM Access Analyzer to identify issues. We're going to actually do it ourselves, get hands-on, and we're going to use it to remediate some identified issues. Our difficulty is beginner, our focus is blue, and here is the real-world context. And although there is a walkthrough, I'll try to do it on my own, and we'll see how far we get. But here it is. As with Active Directory in an on-prem environment, it's critical to apply the principle of least privilege to IAM, which stands for Identity and Access Management in Cloud Environments. So think about enforcing least privilege on users in AWS. Over time, permissions can build up, and object-to-object or identity-to-service control relationships can accumulate, presenting threat actors with opportunities to enter a cloud environment, gain access to sensitive information, and move laterally and vertically in pursuit of their objectives. Hardening your IAM permission assignments while still allowing productive work to be done will strengthen your overall security posture and make us a much tougher target. So let's go ahead and just copy that for our notes, and we'll call this H1, real world context. There we go. The first thing to do when we're learning about a new tool is to read about it. So before we even start authenticating this stuff, which we're going to do shortly, let's just read about AWS IAM Access Analyzer and understand from the actual docs what it does and why we want to use it. So why IAM Access Analyzer? Well, achieving least privilege is a continual journey, blah, blah. It guides us toward least privilege by providing capabilities, I'll zoom in, to set, verify, and refine permissions. It'll actually tell you like, hey, here are some issues in your environment. Here are some possible ways that you can remediate it and get to work. So we can apply least privilege. We can review access, is kind of what I'm talking about. We have permission refinement, validate IAM policies, and automate IAM policy reviews. We have our different use cases here, but I don't know about you guys. When it comes to learning a new tool, you can read all about it. The best way to learn it is to get hands-on with it. So let's jump over to the lab and let's first set up our access. So I shared before, the access key ID in AWS is sort of like a username, and the secret access key is sort of like a password. So our first step is just authenticating to our AWS environment. And the way we can do that is AWS configure. We can give it a profile. So I'm just going to give it a profile. We'll just call it, I'm going to call it Pone Labs, even though I know I already have a Pone Labs profile. And it's going to ask us for our access key ID. So it's going to grab our access key ID right there, and we will paste it in. It's going to ask us for our secret. We'll copy that, and I'm going to paste it in. And our region name can be anything. Well, not anything. It can be any of the regions where your resources are located. I think the resources for this lab is US West 2. I think. So we'll just do US West 2. And now that we have authenticated, we want to say, check, is it actually working? So in Linux, you can do a who am I that tells you, hey, this is your user in this Linux VM or in this Linux machine. Well, in AWS, they have to overcomplicate it because that's what they're good at. So we have to type AWS STS get caller identity profile and then pass it our profile. And there we go. We do have access to it, and we will go ahead and copy that for our notes so we know what access we have as our blue team. So we'll just call this access code block, and we'll do that. And we'll change this to bash. Okay, there we go. So we are the user security user. And we will actually, I was going to try this blind, but I believe this lab is not meant to be done as a CTF. And you can actually see this right here. So when you're working through a lab from Pone Labs, they let you know, hey, is it a good idea to approach this blind or is it not? So you can think about the difference between a try hack me challenge room and a try hack me guided room. When you're on Pone Labs, if you see this at the top, not suitable for a CTF approach, it's more of a guided room. Whereas if it says suitable for a CTF approach, it's more of a challenge room. So it's just a good idea to make sure you know what you're paying attention to. So let's go through this entire walkthrough together. I will go slowly and we will try to do this. Let me zoom out a little bit. So I already configured my account. And now we are going to set our password. And the reason for that is we're going to use the AWS console. So for this lab, we've been doing a lot of stuff from the CLI. For those of you who like the GUI, we're going to play around with the GUI this time. But to do that, we need to go ahead and set a profile, or not a profile, a password for our user. So let's go ahead and do that now. We'll copy this command here. We'll go to our terminal and we'll type it in. Our username is security. Our password, what would be a secure password? I think a secure password is hacksmarter123. Same password I use for my bank account. And we'll do profile, Pone Labs. All right. And now we're going to log into the AWS console. Should pull that out to its own as well, so I can just flip tabs easily. And we will log in with our user. And we need to get our 12-digit account ID. And the way we can get that is when we do this get caller identity. This is our 12-digit account ID right there. So I'm just going to copy that and we'll drop that in there. Our username, I believe, was just security. And of course, hacksmarter123. No, don't save password. And now we are logged into our AWS console. So let's jump back to the guided portion of this lab. Blah, blah, already logged in. US West 2, I think because I set that as my default, we should be good. Yep. Oh, no, it's not. So let's change this to US West 2 there. In the search bar, type Access Analyzer and click on the first result. Don't mind if I do. we can see that Access Analyzer is contained and part of the Identity and Access Management Service. We can use the Analyzer to, some things we already talked about, identify resources that are shared outside our zone of trust. So hey, if you have a public S3 bucket, this is going to let you know. And identify IAM users and roles with assigned permissions that they do not use and could potentially be safe to remove. So we're going to go ahead and create an analyzer. I don't want to see your service menu, bro. No. All right, so we'll go ahead and do create analyzer here, and we're just going to follow all the default stuff for external access analyzer. So this is going to scan resources and tell us, hey, here are the resources that might be external facing that you may just want to fix. Get a drink of water. I think all this other stuff is good, and we'll do create analyzer. But you can see that's guiding through, create analyzer. And now we're going to review findings. I believe this might take a little bit to populate. Minute or so. Let me get caught up on chat in the meantime. I'm missing some stuff on chat. Just good conversations about try hack me, hack the box. Pwned, I've never heard of Pwned Don Oreo Bite. That's YouTube going. Deadpool said, there's an option to increase the width of Notion. That blew my brain. Thanks. I know. The silly thing, though, about Notion is, from what I know, you cannot set it globally. So every time I create a new page, or I don't know if that's what they're called in Notion, a note in Notion, I have to reset the width, which is just silly to me. I should be able to do it automatically, in my opinion. Why do I not see comments from LinkedIn? So I see on LinkedIn there's 4 comments, but I can't see any of the comments. Freaking LinkedIn. If anyone from LinkedIn staff is watching this, fix your buggy platform. For those of you on LinkedIn, if you left a comment and I don't respond to you, it's because LinkedIn sucks at doing live streams and I can't see the comments. So silly. All right. Come on, I believe in you. Let's back out. Maybe we just need to let it chill. Oh, did it throw me in the wrong region? Hold up. Like zoom 2 in. Access Analyzer. And let's drop this back to US West 2. Come on. I believe in you. Do it. There we go. Now we have it. So now we can look at some of this. Before we even look at the walkthrough, if you're brand new, you might even be able to figure out what's going on here. So we have an S3 bucket. Now, if you don't know what an S3 bucket is, think about your traditional CTF when you discover FTP. When you discover FTP or port 21 on a traditional CTF, there's a few things you check. One of the first things you should check is, number 1, does this FTP server allow anonymous login? And if it does, you might be able to find sensitive information being stored in the FTP bucket. Well, that's the same with an S3 bucket. When you see an S3 bucket, the first thing you should ask is, does this S3 bucket allow anonymous login? Can anyone list the content and download the content? If it is, that's a pretty major vulnerability unless it's intended. Sometimes they will store, or companies will store static websites through an S3 bucket, which is fine, but you don't want to be storing sensitive information in a public S3 bucket. There's a lot of breaches. I believe the Capital One breach was tied directly to this, but you can see we have a finding right here for this S3 bucket. All external principals, it means everyone can do write. They have write permissions, tag, and read list. So this bucket is totally public. We have that same bucket right here, and the bucket ACL allows anyone to list it. We have another bucket called customer data. Probably not a good idea to have that exposed, and it looks like all principals can read and list that. We have an EC2 snapshot that is connected to our account ID that anyone can read, write, read, list, but only in this specific account, or I think it's assigned to this account. That is our account. I'm not sure. We have an IAM role that can write. So those are the findings, and we're going to go through each one of these findings one by one and see if we can put on our blue team hat and remediate them. So starting at the top, we see a finding related to our temp bucket. And of course, yours will be different than the one in the guide, and yours will also be different from mine. Every time you spin up a lab, it's going to give you a different environment. And just like I said, it seems any AWS user in the world has access to perform any action on the bucket. So let's go ahead and check out this bucket. We can click, I believe, our finding ID here. And we will pop open our resource here. And for some reason, it reset my region. So let's go back to US West 2. And there is our bucket. We have Kate's access keys. Come on, Kate. Why are you throwing your access keys in a CSV? Step your game up. But let's go back to our bucket here. Here's our logistics temp bucket that we're modifying. We're probably going to go to permissions. Inside this folder are AWS access keys. That's what that emoji looks like. I love it. We need to address this issue straight away. In a real-world environment, this is important. You would want to disable the exposed AWS access key. If it's exposed internet-facing, you just want to assume someone has it. You need to disable it, rotate it, all that stuff. You want to identify the IAM user they belong to. Here, it's pretty obvious, Kate. And understand when the key has been used and what resources the user has been accessing. So you know, hey, have I been breached? We can assume that this part has already been done, and we are now focusing on removing this access. Under bucket policy, we can click the edit button. That's right here. So one of the best things that you can understand about AWS is understanding how to read these policies. So I'll edit here. But before we edit, let's understand what's going on here. This version is basically the same, but here's the statement, the part that matters. Can I zoom in on this? Okay, I can zoom in a little bit for you guys. The effect is allow, so it's not deny. And principal, we have a wild card here, and that's a big issue. This is saying anyone. And even people outside of our AWS account, the principal, anyone, this applies to anyone. So anyone is allowed to do any action, another wild card here. So any action to the S3 bucket. So anyone, right? Anyone is allowed to do any action to the S3 bucket, and specifically to this resource right here, another wild card. So we can modify, read, delete any resource inside of this S3 bucket. That's what that policy is telling us. And we are going to modify that policy. Am I zoomed out? Sorry, if I'm zoomed in too much, it's going to break the editing when we're playing around with it. But we're going to add this, and we'll just copy and paste it, and I'll do my best to explain what's going on here. And we'll also have to update it so it matches our account. But now with this updated one, let's walk through what's going on here. So we do have the same allow thing, but notice our principal is not a wild card. That's a big change that you should draw your attention to. It's not a wild card. Instead, it's applying only to specific users in our AWS account. Specifically, the security user and the Kate user are then able to modify our S3 bucket. So it's not everyone. Therefore, it's no longer going to be internet facing. But now, if you're following along in this lab, remember that your bucket name is going to be different, and your account name or your account 12-digit ID is going to be different, so you do need to update those values. The easiest way to do that is we can just copy this for our bucket, and we'll want to replace this name right here with our bucket name. And then for our account, if we have that right here, and we'll just update our account so it matches the account that we're working with in the lab, and that should make it so these are no longer internet facing. There we go. And if we go back to Access Analyzer and click rescan, there we go. We successfully resolved it. We put on our blue team hat, and we saved a vulnerability from happening. We stopped our S3 bucket from being publicly exposed. So we did it. HunterBot said, open buckets are still a problem. I found a bucket that had 30,000 customer data in a bug bounty program. Dude, amazing and awesome find. HunterBot, how did you find it? If you don't mind me asking, did you use like that gray warfare, whatever it's called, to find buckets, or were you just looking at what was in scope? Did you find a bucket in like source code and then see if you could list it? I'm just curious how you hunted that down. Or Shodan, I suppose. You could use Shodan as well. Maybe target the org. Leonardo said, wild streaming question. Have you ever dabbled in setting up ultra low latency in the YouTube stream? No, I don't know how. I should. I think YouTube has the least delay though between the different platforms. What up, Hacking Notes? Good to have you here, my friend. All right, well, we solved one issue. Congratulations, you can pat yourself on the back, but let's go to our Access Analyzer here, and I'm going to zoom out so we can see everything, and we'll probably just refresh this real quick. It's not going to refresh. Can I go to all findings? Yeah, so we have the one resolved. Beautiful. So we did successfully resolve that finding. And yep, I did all that. Next finding, let's click on the finding ID for the same bucket. We might as well do this, and these tabs are already open. So here's the other finding we're going to be messing with. This is the one is resolved, but we have this one affecting the same bucket that based on the bucket ACL, anyone can list content in the bucket. So as indicated above, we can say any valid AWS account, not just any AWS IAM user in the AWS account, but in any AWS account. So not a totally anonymous user, but someone with a different AWS account can do this, which is actually a very common misconfiguration you'll stumble across in the wild, can list the contents of our bucket. Click on the S3 bucket link as before, if the tab isn't still open, which we have that, and we'll go to here. We'll go to our temp bucket right here. We will go to permissions and ACL. Okay, cool. I want to see what HunterBot said. So HunterBot said I was navigating the InScope site and saw they hosted images through that bucket. So I navigated the bucket and saw I had directory listing enabled. Amazing. Like something that simple that a lot of people overlook. Congrats on finding that. Yeah, thank you, Leonardo. Send that over to me. I would love to check that out. All right. So here is our access control list, or our ACL for our bucket. And we can probably guess what we need to do. But if we look at that, we can see the problematic setting below, right there. No, this could be a legitimate setting, which is what I mentioned at the beginning. For example, if the bucket contained only data that was for public access, such as static website assets. However, in this case, the bucket shouldn't have been world readable or world writable, right? We have creds being stored there. Untick the everyone and click Save Changes. All right, and is this that finding? Let's rescan, and resolved. We have successfully resolved another finding, right? Give yourself a pat on the back. Congratulations, we're doing well with our blue team hat on so far. And if we just back out here, view active findings, I'm gonna do all, and oh, that one's not resolved yet, but it will. It will. I believe it. It just takes some time. Oh well, it will resolve itself, I promise. We see it resolved on that other window. Let's just move on. All right, jumping back to the finding details and clicking rescan, we resolved another finding. I did that. Let's check out what seems to be a bucket related to customer data. And that is this one right here, which says all principals based on the bucket policy can read and list. So let's get that pulled up, and we can go ahead and open up our customer data bucket there. Looking at the finding details, we see that any AWS user that is aware of the bucket name would be able to list and read the bucket contents. Assuming that only the user Francesco, who adds and accesses customer data and security, should have access, we can replace this policy with the policy below. Now, let's not script kiddie this. Let's understand. Let's read through the broken policy so we know what's going on. All right. So we have, once again, the allow statement, which has a wild card, so anyone is allowed to do two things, two actions on the S3 bucket. They can get an object, which means they can download, and they can list the bucket. So exactly what HunterBot was just saying is what he discovered in the real world was the fact that anything was world listable. 0xDar Smooth said, cheap viewers and followers on Streamboo. The frick, dude, why would I pay for followers and viewers, homie? You silly person. Can I, I can't even moderate you. You'll just have to, just keep your spam there. It is what it is. It's too hard for me to moderate while I'm live streaming. I need to obviously handle, oh wait, no, I got it. Restrict. And what else can I do? I'm such a noob. Anyways, 0xDar Smooth, I don't want your cheap viewers and freaking followers. Only scrubs are buying viewers and followers on Twitch or YouTube. Absolute silliness. Anyways, back to the stream. You can see that anyone is allowed to get objects and list objects, and applies to this resource and with the wildcard. So any customer data, they're able to do that too. So what we are setting up, if we look back at our lab, we'll copy this in and then we'll read through it, make sure we understand what's going on so we're not just, once again, script kidding it. If I could type. Oh, maybe I should hit edit. Good job, Tyler. Learn how to use the computer. Okay, I apologize. This is really small. Let me zoom in for you a little bit. But now look at the difference here. We have our allow effect again, but notice we're not using a wildcard, so that's the first fix. We're applying it to specific AWS principals or users. We have our security user, which is the user we're logged in as now, and we have our Francesco user, and that's the person who accesses the customer data. And what actions are these two users allowed to do? Well, they can get objects, they can get stuff from the bucket, they can list it, and they can upload data, which makes sense, and it only applies to this customer resource right there. Now, a few changes we do need to make, like before, is our bucket name is going to be different than what's in the lab, so we'll grab our bucket name and just make sure we replace this with the proper bucket name. And we also want to grab our account ID from right there. Replace that. Save changes. Did it go through? I think so. And let's see if we remediated it. And it's resolved. Beautiful. We'll go back out to our buckets here in case we have more buckets to play around with. All right, so resolved, 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 and now we have this EC2 snapshot one. You know, actually, let's look at it ourselves. What is this saying it can do? So we have an external principal that has this access to our snapshots, it would appear, based on the finding. So organization access role. Oh, never mind. I'm at the wrong one. Let's go back to this and we'll close this out. They want us to do this one first. And so what's this one? External principal ID allows them to assume a role. All right. Actually, on checking the documentation or the cloud team internally, we find that this role is automatically created for any AWS account that is a member of an AWS org. It must be the NSA's backdoor. AWS Organizations is an account management service that allows businesses to consolidate multiple AWS accounts into an organization, which then share billing details and optionally also AWS credits and data with the NSA. And this also allows centralized management of resources. This configuration is intended, and we can safely click archive and move on to the next finding. So clicking archive is like saying, hey, this is a false positive. You don't need to worry about that. All right. So we have one more, our EC2 snapshot one, which gives an external account access to our EC2, which seems like a violation of the principle of least privilege, unless it is there on purpose, right? Let's check our last finding. We see that it's an EC2 EBS snapshot has been shared with the AWS account ID of a consultant. In this case, the snapshot contained infrastructure as code backups that might have contained sensitive credentials, so we should remove access. We can assume that the credits have already been rotated. Click on the resource URL. All right, click on the resource URL. All right, there it is. There's our shared account. I'm guessing just modify permissions. Select the snapshot, and from the actions, actions, okay. Click modify permissions. I could have done it from either page. And we're just going to remove that person, right? Remove selected. Let's double check. Remove selected, yeah. And we successfully resolved it. Let me double check. Let's see if everything is resolved. Go to our Access Analyzer. Right there. All right, if we go to all, you can see resolved, archived, resolved, resolved, resolved. So we successfully resolved all of the findings which were hardening AWS account. This would prevent an attacker or a pen tester from getting easy access to your account by looking at some of these things that are internet exposed or publicly accessible. We have resolved all the external access tests. We could also set up an unused access analyzer that identifies permissions that we could potentially remove in line with the principle of least privilege. Do I need to? Yeah, well, let's do it. So Access Analyzer, we go to IAM, Unused Access, here we go. Create Analyzer. And we'll create. All right. After creating the analyzer, we can wait some time for the first scan to kick off, which does take a little bit. This is a really useful service, and given how critical IAM is to cloud security, it's worth staying on top of and applying the principle of least privilege throughout your environment where possible. I would assume in mature cloud organizations, they have a team that's doing this auditing on a regular basis. The flag for this lab can be found in the now secure S3 bucket that holds customer data. All right. Well, let's go ahead and get our flag, customer data, private, flag, and we just download it or open it. Either one would work. Apparently it's going to open Visual Studio Code, kind of an overkill, but I dig it. And let's go ahead and drop our flag in there. And there we go. We just completed the Prevent Breaches with AWS IAM Access Analyzer lab on Pone Labs. A lot to say. Try to say that 3 times fast. But the cool thing about this lab is I've demonstrated a lot of ways that when S3 is misconfigured or an IAM role is misconfigured, an attacker is able to elevate their privileges or gain initial access into your environment. So by using IAM Access Analyzer on the blue team side of things, you can prevent an attacker like me from getting into your AWS environment. I would encourage you, if you are on an AWS team, that you have a team in place or a regular pattern in place where you're auditing these privileges and these roles, especially the external facing roles, on a regular basis. Hey, hope you found this video helpful, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.